Hi everybody, welcome to this interesting, slightly out of character video for this channel. I've decided to try something new. It didn't really, wasn't planned, but it came to me this evening that I wanted to focus on a concept in our cards and sort of explore it intellectually and emotionally from my own perspective. I will be doing my weekly tomorrow or on Friday, but I wanted to start adding some extra content, and it sort of just so happened that I had an unfortunate day in general. Nothing particularly bad happened, but I really do feel in these energies like I'm on a seesaw. There's days when I find some ability to explore new dimensionality and new parts of my consciousness, where I feel buoyant, energized, excited. And then others, when for no particular reason, a set of circumstances comes together, usually in alignment with the astrology, of course. The thing is that you can understand as much as you want what the planetary aspects are, but until you actually are faced with a situation in your life, you don't necessarily recognize how that's going to play out for you individually, right? And a little over a year ago, I had a severe nervous breakdown where I started having horrible successive panic attacks. At the peak of it, when I was hospitalized, I literally was having 6 or 7 panic attacks a day, and that was a very, very scary period in my life. To me, it corresponded to a spiritual awakening that had been taking place over a much longer period of time, many years before that, but I had been holding so much together in order to pretend that I was okay with the status quo and trying to fit in places and activities and culture that was not mine and that I had no interest in, really, and it was causing almost a schizophrenia within me, which over the course of time I was able to address in recovery from that nervous breakdown, and I fully embraced my spiritual path. Well, I say I fully embraced it. I embraced committing myself 100% to it. I also have come to understand that there's wavering aspects to that too. I'm sure you all understand what I mean. Life happens and we get sidetracked, or we are three-dimensional attractions taunt and torment us back into old behaviors, or just put us in a place of self-doubt. Like, am I crazy for seeing life the way that I do? It all makes sense to me on an individualistic, intellectual plane, and it certainly resonates with me on a collective spiritual level. And I mean, I know that my faith in the ideas of the law of one and the Great Awakening that we're all in the process of experiencing, that these things are real, that there truly is, a giant sort of matrix system, and energetically speaking, there's so much more to us than has ever really been explored in mainstream culture, that a lot of this stuff we've had to piecemeal for ourselves, those of us on this spiritual awakening. And if you're watching this, I'm pretty sure that you are at least somewhat experiencing, or have experienced, or will experience variations on these emotions that I'm talking about. Now, I don't really want to focus on the whole issue of anxiety per se, certainly not that particular chapter in my life. There are abundant reasons of, in terms of the causes of that, and those are maybe for another video at some point. But the reason I speak of all of this is because today I woke up very late, basically because I was reading until late last night, and that sort of already threw me a little bit. It was really warm here in Southern California, and sitting indoors, I didn't have the AC on, I had the windows open, and I was doing different things like writing and checking up on things, and it got really warm indoors, and I kind of knew that feeling of discomfort, but I've always enjoyed being warm. I don't have the same anxieties that a lot of people have about heat, but that doesn't mean that I'm fully cognizant in terms of my physiology and how that can affect the body. Much less so when I'm outdoors, but when I'm indoors it gets stuffy. I don't know, it's something about the air. And I had no idea that I was actually feeling really anxious throughout the day. I knew I had been feeling antsy. I know that the Martian energy is really causing a lot of there's just this tearing apart inside right now for so many of us, I think, about wanting to move forward and then getting stuck somehow. And this has been going on all year long, right? I mean, the whole state of the world has affected everything about the stop-start aspects of our lives. And I know that I've made enormous progress in so many ways. I mean, my perspective on life, on the experience of life, the life cycle, the universe, spirituality as a whole, I've learned so much, and I'm always expanding, constant expansion. But I'm a human being, and I have emotions, and I experience great feelings of isolation, of alienation, because I don't have people in my environment who understand me in that way, or who actually want to. I mean, the reality is that's not pointing the finger at anybody in particular, but we live in an extremely narcissistic, self-obsessed, self-serving world, and most of the time people don't even realize how wrapped up in themselves they are, and how little effort they actually are making to understand that the person right next to them has a completely different set of values, and there's a reason why they have those values, and that it's interesting to discover why they have those values and why they went down that path and you went down another, and then you find commonality, and then you expand, and then you grow. And that doesn't happen a lot. I mean, sometimes serendipitously you encounter somebody who does resonate on that level with you, and I am a solid believer in that process. But when you're under lockdown, that doesn't really happen very often, obviously. So I have a couple of online communities that I'm a part of. One is a spiritual community, and we're trying very hard to establish some form of interconnectedness, and it's difficult for a variety of reasons. And that's not problematic at all. I mean, in terms of the resonance and frequency and so on and so forth, it's a beautiful thing. It will expand, and I look forward to that happening. But then I have my 3D identity, and I am a child of the 80s, and I grew up loving Madonna, have always been a steadfast Madonna fan, as some of you know watching this. I don't talk about that kind of thing in these types of videos on my channel in any case, because I don't actually talk about her much to anybody anymore in my world, because she is such a catalyzing individual, and she represents so many things that other people don't wish to really see in themselves, both for in terms of her brilliance artistically and creatively, and in the horrors of her narcissism, and her inability to sometimes seem as self-aware as you would expect of a person in that position. But again, no judgment, because we don't know what her life is like. But I tell you all of this because I have over the years always been involved in Madonna forum communities online, and they are vicious places, because there are a bunch of little prick homos on there, and I'm homosexual myself, so that's not meant in a homophobic way, but there's different categories of that culture, and I continue to hold true to the notion that in my lifetime I saw the gay male identity go from being exceptional in society, perhaps through the counterculture, recognizing that so many gay men have been creative pillars, philosophical pillars, activist pillars. I grew up through the AIDS crisis, which was deeply traumatic, obviously, in a very homophobic environment too. And those difficult limitations on my sexual identity and people of my generation sort of continued to forge this very strong sense of an inner life, and therefore the mind developed in concepts that in ways that perhaps the majority of people did not. So there was that was the silver lining, essentially, right? And we fought for equality and integration and assimilation, and obviously that was predominantly successful in most people's eyes. I personally am not a person that wanted to be heteronormalized. The whole idea of celebrating gay identity to me was not about being able to serve in the military and get married. But equality comes in an imperfect society in the ways that we can establish it, and then it's up to the individuals to decide whether or not they've they feel that they've gotten their fair share, and usually there's a plateau, and then people integrate, and then they start living their lives normally, and they become like everyone else. That's the idea that we have about immigrants too, right? Well, from my perspective, that's not a very attractive notion, to become immersed in somebody else's version of an identity. And subsequently, gay culture has become extraordinarily superficial over the last 10, 15 years. I mean, the entire premise of homosexuality as an identity and queer culture revolving around drag queens. What can I say? I mean, I don't wish to dismiss those people, but they don't speak for me, and so I don't know who the fuck speaks for me other than me. So that's why I'm here speaking about all these different things, which I hope will come together by the end of this video. But in terms of how that translates on a Madonna forum, you can imagine that you get a bunch of sassy people behind their computers, and they're not open to an intellectual dynamic in conversation, and in being confronted with somebody who uses language more thoughtfully and more expansively, they turn into little bitches. I mean, it's so basic, and I understand the psychology of it, and I shouldn't be shocked by it, but I allowed myself to get sucked into another situation like that on one of these, there's only one forum that I post on at this point. I've actually been banned from quite a few over the years because of this same dynamic, which I will explore what's problematic in me too. We will get to that. But I never insult anybody. I would never make personal judgments. Everything that I verbalize or externalize in writing, whatever the creative path is, it is an I statement, and there's very little that I will state without first indicating that it is in my opinion. But these things, the subtleties and nuances of communication have no bearing in that kind of an environment, and I don't know why I think that somehow I'm there to elevate it. It's obviously a narcissistic, there's a narcissistic element to it in me that I need to let go of. And it's not to say that my conscious intention is to prove myself as being better than others, but somehow subconsciously I expect that, and it manifests. And my conclusion has been that now I've just withdrawn, and I don't want to. I mean, it's sad for me, because even if it's just a titillation of something that's deeply rooted in my childhood and adolescence, I enjoy having that body of knowledge from my passion, that I am an authority on Madonna's career and her creative output, and the symbolism that one could find in it intellectually, as well as the more esoteric and metaphysical evolution of her psychologically as a public figure, so on and so forth. These are things that interest me. I understand that they're not going to be of interest to everyone. And anybody who's been in my life personally for the last, 20 years at least, could honestly, I'm sure, say that, there came a point where I just stopped. externalizing it. But there was a long period in my life where that defined me in some way. Being gay and being a Madonna fan, these are things that I actually felt defined me in my youth. Thank goodness I have evolved. Not because either of those things are wrong, but because they're just tiny little fragments of who I am as a person. If only I had known that, or been confident enough to own that, with all of the creativity that was flowing through me all those years. But again, that's for another video. And there is a flow to this, and I want you right now to understand that I am doing this video and telling you all this because it is reflective of a crisis in the energies right now, in terms of what's going on with Mars and Jupiter and Pluto and Saturn. And in our weekly, I'll talk more about the fact that Uranus is going retrograde, and that's in our external world. There's going to be more shifts, unexpected shifts. But we're sticking with the personal right now. And so hopefully there's something relatable in what I'm talking about in this. I'm sure there is I know there is if you can step inside my world. So the antagonism aimed at me, that I tried very diplomatically to handle with my grown-up boots on, it was like a punch out. I mean, eventually I had to walk away from it, feeling like my ego was a little bruised because I wasn't going to have the last word, and I wasn't going to be able to have a neat and tidy closure to the situation at hand. But this was symptomatic of something much deeper going on in me. My frustrations with not being heard, not being understood, not having my tribe, not knowing how to provide myself with the validation that my ego often still requires. A feeling of a lack of love outside of myself, which of course is the fundamental problem. I mean, I know that the goal is to be love, you know? I am infinite love. But my ego tears me away from that concept because of past life trauma, current life trauma, difficult situations that have arisen as a result of the global pandemic, having to put to bed permanently a lot of expectations of life. And yes, there will be infinite new experiences, and everything evolves, everything changes, but it doesn't stop us from feeling uncomfortable feelings. And I then later this afternoon, after walking around being quite irritable, not that there's anybody around me to experience that, but my energy was just completely off, and I just couldn't commit to doing anything. I should, see, terrible word, take it away. I wanted to see myself writing, working on some music that I could be working on, reading, whatever it would have been that normally I would have enjoyed, and that I have found myself in resistance to on and off for some time now. it just pushed me over the edge, and I got one of those awful, I don't know what anybody watching this has ever had one of these, but I guess it's considered a eye migraine, but it's like when from stress and blood pressure and overheating and so on and so forth all comes together, and it's like your peripheral vision starts, like you start seeing shapes, and then like to me what happens is I start like seeing, it's almost like everything's kaleidoscope vision is what it's called, and it's like it all starts looking very strange, and I know exactly what to do. It's happened to me like a few times in my life, and it is hereditary usually, and it's brought on by stress. And I have always been I'm not a stressed person anymore, but for many years anxiety caused enormous amounts of stress in me, and all of the self-destructive fallout that comes from that nightmare self imprisonment. So anyway, even though I knew what it was, and even though I have a strong understanding of the law of one, and the idea that this is an infinite cycle of life, and that this is light is something that nobody really understands. You have to see it as spiritual matter, but it's like that's what provides us with this hologram of life as we experience it. And so I have no fear intellectually of death. In fact, I rather look forward to the continuation of the process, but I'm a recovered depressive person who fell into horrible suicidal ideation at times in my life as a result of anxiety and trauma and whatever else. And so emotionally, when I experience anything that is a manifestation of anxiety or repressed emotion, even with all of my intellect and all of my logical thinking and all of my magical thinking and all of my spiritual beliefs, I can still fall into that panic, of like, whoa, like, this is, for whatever reason, completely irrationally terrifying. I do, however, now have the tools to deal with this. So I put on, I don't know whether many of you, or I know some of you are, because some of you are people in my life that watch this, familiar with Steve Nobel. You can find his meditations on YouTube. But his meditations are, for me, extraordinary, and he has a couple of really short ones. They're actually called like quick alignment meditations, and I think that they're specifically made for circumstances like this, where you have 12 to 20 minutes to just lie down, eyes closed. I had crystals with me, and I just breathed through it. Not in a, normally when I meditate, I'm looking to open my third eye, and I'm looking to, sort of experience an out of body kind of state. But in this case, it's more like a grounding exercise, and it works. Because it takes you outside of your thoughts, and you're focused on your breathing. So of course, 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, it subsided. But it freaked me out, and it made me really emotional. Usually I work out every day, and I decided not to work out, which I feel like my body was kind of telling me that I maybe had a little bit of exhaustion going on, and so instead I listened to some music, and I listened to an album by Linda Ronstadt that was actually one of my, I was a very weird teenager, and I loved, what was it called? Cry Like a Rainstorm, Howl Like the Wind. It came out in 1989, and it accompanied my poetic, romantic disaster of unrequited adolescent love and so on and so forth. But there's some really sad songs on it. There's some that are fun and beautiful, and her voice is of course always beautiful, but really difficult songs. And one of them, excuse me, I hate being emotional on camera, but one of them is, well, two of them are actually about endings. One is called Adios, and that is sung with Brian Wilson, and it's a beautiful song about somebody growing up from a love from a period in their life, and I don't know exactly what it was, actually. That's just how I interpreted it. Anyway, it's a beautiful song. And then there's another that closes the album. It's called Goodbye, My Friend, which is specifically about death. And one of my dearest friends, who I grew up with, took her life when I was 19, she was 20. It was right before I left France to move to New York. In fact, that's why I left France and moved to New York. Well, I didn't even really choose that path, it just kind of happened. Again, for another video perhaps one day. But I realize that all of the things that I feel right now are related to death, and not death as in physical death, although there's elements of that. But it's my birthday in like 2 weeks' time, and so, you know, when I was younger, well, birthdays have never really been that much about celebration for me. There was perhaps a really very egocentric time in my life in my 20s when I used to think that my birthdays should be all about me. But I've always found birthdays to be emotionally disturbing, even as a child, because it would be a measure of how many people were going to come to my birthday party, which was a measure of how loved I was, or whether I even would have a birthday party, and you know, whatever the anxieties were, you know. And God knows there were so many. I mean, to think so much all the time as I have done most of my life is just really a blessing and a massive curse all at once. So I wanted to explore the concept of death in the tarot, but with the new Osho deck, which is not called death in that card. It is called transformation. It's number 13. Obviously, that's a very spiritual number, and the Kabbalistic number of ascension, essentially. I mean, of graduation, should I say, not ascension, of, you know, Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to read, well, first of all, I'm going to show you the card. And I'm going to read about the card and hold it there so that you are observing that while I'm reading it. But here we go. The central figure in this card sits atop the vast flower of the void and holds the symbol of transformation, the sword that cuts through illusion, the snake that rejuvenates itself by shedding its skin, the broken chain of limitations, and the yin-yang symbol of transcending duality. One of its hands rests on its lap, open and receptive. The other reaches down to touch the mouth of a sleeping face, symbolizing the silence that comes when we are at rest. This is a time for a deep let go. Allow any pain, sorrow, or difficulty just to be there, accepting its facticity. It is very much like the experience of Gautama Buddha when, after years of seeking, he finally gave up knowing there was nothing more he could do. That very night, he became enlightened. Transformation comes like death in its own time, and like death, it takes you from one dimension into another. A master in Zen is not simply a teacher. In all the religions, there are only teachers. They teach you about subjects which you don't know, and they ask you to believe because there is no way to bring those experiences into objective reality. Neither has the teacher known them. He has believed them. He transfers his belief to somebody else. Zen is not a believer's world. It is not for the faithful ones. It is for those daring souls who can drop all belief, unbelief, doubt, reason, mind, and simply enter into their pure existence without boundaries. But it brings a tremendous transformation. Hence, let me say that while others are involved in philosophies, Zen is involved in metamorphosis, in a transformation. It is authentic alchemy. It changes you from base metal into gold. But its language has to be understood, not with your reasoning and intellectual mind, but with your loving heart, or even just listening, not bothering whether it is true or not. And a moment comes suddenly that you see it, which has been eluding you your whole life. Suddenly, what Gautama Buddha calls 84,000 doors open. Transformation. That is what we are all experiencing in ways that we either are seeking to master while being in surrender to, or we are resisting. And when we resist, we feel more and more discomfort. And who wants to feel that? So, I have some releasing to do tonight. And I imagine that you do too, and you will in the coming days. So let us all set an intention to be present for ourselves and be mindfully present for others who are also likely to be experiencing things that they don't necessarily understand or have mastery of, and we all need to be a little kinder to each other, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more invested, and we all need to believe more in ourselves. I'll see you in the weekly. Namaste.